Every year, thousands of people witness mysterious phenomena in the sky. What is it? An unusual natural occurrence or a secret hint at the existence of other civilizations? The thirst to know the truth drives us to attempt to understand how to classify these strange observations. However, the question of unidentified flying objects remains open and unresolved. The legendary hero of novels, Sherlock Holmes, once said, "When you have eliminated the impossible, whatever remains, however improbable, must be the truth." This thought emphasizes the importance of a scientific approach to the UFO phenomenon, which continues to provoke debate. Opinions on the nature of UFOs are divided. Some support the theory of extraterrestrial origin of the objects, while others completely deny it. Such contradictions complicate serious discussions and the exploration of alternative explanations. In 1997, at the initiative of American millionaire Lauren Sarek, a scientific conference dedicated to the UFO phenomenon took place. In Poughkeepsie, New Jersey, renowned scientists from around the world gathered. This was the first attempt at a scientific discussion of mysterious phenomena since 1969, when the United States Air Force provided its data to a group of experts for analysis. Under the leadership of astrophysicist Peter Stark, the conference confronted scientists with the fact of the existence of unexplained phenomena. Among the invitees were Mark Roediger and John Schuessler. The main task of the meeting was to review the famous Condon Report, which in the 1960s claimed that the UFO phenomenon did not warrant serious scientific investigation. Peter Stark disagreed with this position and sought to gather a group of scientists for an objective examination of the UFO phenomenon. Stark's second goal was to present the scientific community with new evidence of UFO sightings. He was interested in the reaction of his colleagues, as at that time many scientists were skeptical of research in this area. The conference provided access to tangible evidence collected by ufologists. However, the analysis of this data was to be conducted by those who had no direct relation to the study of UFOs. The conference emphasized factual information rather than fabricated stories. Real photographs, video recordings, medical examination data, and soil analysis were presented. In the field of UFO studies, there is a multitude of evidence, but the discussion of this information in the scientific world occurs extremely rarely. Dr. Stark considered it necessary to conduct an objective analysis of the data from the perspective of scientists not associated with ufology, to determine whether this phenomenon deserves attention and in what direction research should be conducted. Stark noted that there was nothing fantastical in the reports presented at the conference. He himself attended the meeting and presented several testimonies that, in his opinion, were clear and irrefutable evidence of the existence of unexplained phenomena. This was a serious discussion among scientists, striving to understand a controversial subject. However, the main difficulty remained in determining which data should be considered as the basis for research. For many years, ufology had focused not so much on serious research as on the collection of rumors and gossip, which complicated the search for substantive facts. From 1991 to 1994, Nick Pope, a researcher working on behalf of the British government, gained access to documents stored in the archives of the Ministry of Defense. His task was to assess the credibility of eyewitness accounts of UFOs. According to him, it can be confidently asserted that 90 or even 95% of the testimonies were the result of misidentification of ordinary natural phenomena. Often the conditions of observation were unusual, or the observer was encountering a specific object or natural phenomenon for the first time. However, as Pope notes, there always remained facts that could not be so easily explained. This applied to both British and American studies. He recalls the history of Project Blue Book, emphasizing that this is not about cases where there is a lack of data or eyewitness accounts. I mean reports from military and civilian pilots who have seen real aerial objects of a specific shape, he says. These cases were recorded by radar and moreover, there is evidence of prolonged pursuits of unknown objects by military aircraft. In such cases, there are high-quality photo and video data that are carefully studied and analyzed. Pope expresses his viewpoint. Personally, I cannot deny the validity of the theory of the existence of the UFO phenomenon. He adds that, having dismissed all possible explanations, it is quite possible to suggest the intervention of extraterrestrials. However, he also acknowledges, "Can I prove my point of view? No. We have no scientific basis." Nevertheless, he has irrefutable material evidence that people have indeed observed UFOs. In the archives, there are thousands of testimonies and records confirming that they have witnessed something unusual. Pop emphasizes that the assertion that all of this is either a hoax or reality is too straightforward. The truth, as I see it, lies somewhere between these positions, he says. He acknowledges that in most cases they encounter false testimonies that arise from unintentional observer misinterpretation. Sometimes there is also deliberate deception or a conscious desire to trick people, he adds. In his opinion, if someone encounters phenomena that they cannot explain, they usually turn to the police in hopes of getting some kind of answer. Of the many testimonies examined, in fact, none are a hoax. Perhaps there is one hoax for every 1,000 reports, but no more, asserts Pop. He also notes that in science, new discoveries occur weekly. Not long ago, we learned about temperature fluctuations in the upper layers of the atmosphere, which could explain some cases of strange lights appearing in the sky, he says. Therefore, there are a whole range of probable versions. One of them is the extraterrestrial theory, although it contains many more assumptions. Pop continues, if one looks at the reports from pilots and radar data, according to which these objects seem to move purposefully, there is a strong temptation to believe that they are controlled by intelligent beings. However, he adds that it is unlikely that this can be called a real fact. It is merely one of the possible explanations. Unfortunately, ufologists in their research only have eyewitness testimony data. How much can we trust these reports? Pop questions. Rationalists, according to him, do not take verbal testimonies into account, considering them unproven. Perhaps they should approach eyewitness testimonies with a degree of skepticism, he notes, emphasizing that valuable information about the UFO phenomenon can be found in these testimonies. Pop also points out that critics highlight another weak point of all testimonies. Eyewitnesses usually do not know how to properly observe flying objects, even if they are police or military pilots. Arguments against the credibility of UFO sighting accounts are typically put forth by rationalists. There is a significant difference between the opinions of scientists engaged in research and rationalists who steadfastly reject any stories about UFOs. The latter claim that no astronomer has ever seen a UFO. If certain objects were to appear in our airspace, scientists, especially astronomers, would not be able to miss them. However, in reality, astronomers also encounter the UFO phenomenon, just like random witnesses. This interesting fact was revealed in 1977 by astrophysicist Peter Sturrock. His research showed that 5% of all UFO witnesses are indeed astronomers. But they typically do not observe the entire picture of the starry sky, as they are interested in a specific direction in studying nature. The field of view of a telescope is quite limited. If an astronomer were to see a UFO, it could only be the appearance of moving objects, similar to a satellite or a meteorite, or, less frequently, a bird flying at such a height. An astronomer simply does not have the time to catch a flying object in the lens again. While working, an astronomer does not pay attention to passing meteorites. They may see unusual objects in the sky, but they do not focus on them when working at the telescope. This is the main problem. In discussing the UFO phenomenon, some categorically assert that it does not exist. Their main argument is that scientists do not encounter these objects during their observations of nature. However, scientists generally do not engage in direct observations. They study natural phenomena in specially equipped laboratories, which does not align with the image of scientists that is imposed on us by popular science magazines. Most testimonies of UFO sightings have quite rational explanations and should not be attributed to extraterrestrial intervention, at least until all other versions have been investigated. For example, weather balloons can quite easily be mistaken for UFOs, although such cases occur quite rarely. Even experienced observers, such as military and civilian pilots, sometimes become confused when encountering a large silver sphere. Canadian pilot Don Ledger, co-author of a book on unusual phenomena, became seriously interested in the reports of his colleagues. He often encountered widespread misconceptions. Pilots mistook weather balloons, Venus, airplanes, meteorites, auroras, and even unusually shaped clouds for UFOs. Meteorological balloons are most often mistaken for UFOs as they are quite large, with some reaching 200 meters in diameter, and they are filled with helium, equipped with the necessary scientific instruments. Imagine yourself in the position of a pilot working for the Canadian Postal Service. You have plenty of concerns, and you simply cannot track when and where meteorological balloons are launched into the air. They are usually launched in the north where the atmosphere is more stable. They rise to quite a high altitude, several tens of thousands of meters. You have probably seen photographs of meteorological balloons more than once. They have an elongated shape and somewhat resemble a baseball bat. Shimmering silver spheres located in the upper layers of the atmosphere appear similar to parachutes. When meteorological balloons reach a certain height, they expand due to the reduced atmospheric pressure and become like huge silver spheres, glistening in the rays of the sun. This shine is explained by the properties of the material from which the balloons are made, reflecting sunlight. Sometimes meteorological balloons remain in the upper layers of the atmosphere for a long time, for several weeks, and naturally, people mistake them for UFOs. I am sure that many reports of UFOs actually pertain to meteorological balloons. In reality, observers do not encounter meteorological balloons that often, as they are launched in the northern part of the province of Quebec, where the wind mainly blows from the west, and these balloons cannot move, say, from north to south. Skeptics should seek more convincing explanations than a simple focus on meteorological balloons. Otherwise, it turns out that these devices have literally filled our airspace, which is completely untrue. Some eyewitnesses may have indeed seen airplanes. These machines are typically made of aluminum and painted white. When the sun is on the horizon, it can create illusions where the invisible wings of an airplane become difficult to perceive, and only a white stripe in the sky becomes visible. If an airplane is far away and the sound of its engines is not heard, it can easily be mistaken for a UFO. Sometimes even planets, such as Venus, are mistaken for unidentified flying objects. In Quebec, highways with even numbers run from east to west, while those with odd numbers run from north to south. Many people travel between Montreal and Quebec City and may observe Venus rising in the west. However, if someone sees Venus in the north, it will be a clear sign of a mistake. Of all the planets, Venus is most often mistaken for a UFO. Thus, people can mistakenly take both airplanes and planets for unidentified flying objects. This is indeed the case. However, meteorological balloons cannot explain all instances, as we are led to believe. In the spring of 2002, a businessman from Montreal filmed a curious video. Early in the morning, he captured a strange object in the clear sky. However, an examination revealed that this unusual object was simply a postal airplane approaching to land at the nearest airfield. Sometimes the reasons for errors can be explained quite simply. Officer Nelson Jean from the Quebec Provincial Police recalls one instance of a UFO sighting. At that time, his service was responsible for regions such as Mandaraji, Montreal, Laval, Laurentians, and Lonan Dyer. He recounts, "I remember that it happened near Saint-Joly. We received a call reporting that colorful lights were observed in the sky. When we arrived at the scene, it turned out that it was nothing other than a laser show at a local nightclub. Someone accidentally or intentionally directed a laser straight into the sky, and the locals decided that it was something cosmic, possibly a UFO and a signal from aliens." Besides laser shows, airplanes, and meteorological balloons, it is important to remember that various types of space debris often appear in the atmosphere, flying in from low Earth orbit. Several years ago, a similar phenomenon was observed in France. Police received thousands of calls from witnesses convinced that they were seeing a UFO. At that time, Jean-Jacques Velasco headed CIPRA, the French service for investigating phenomena caused by the entry of external objects into the atmosphere, which is part of the National Center for Space Studies. Recently, an increasing number of UFO sighting reports can be explained by the fall of debris from orbit. This is exactly what happened on the 5th of November in 1990 when a fantastic display of debris from a Russian rocket was observed. Fragments were scattered across the airspace over all of Europe, with particularly many over France. Video footage and photographs can become an indispensable tool for a biologist striving to unravel the mystery of the UFO phenomenon. However, even such visual evidence does not confirm extraterrestrial origins of UFOs. It is no secret that modern computer technologies allow anyone to create montage footage that rivals the quality of Hollywood professionals. The name of the expert who collaborates with the National Center for Space Studies is quite well known among photographers. He came to the conclusion that in the study of the UFO phenomenon, one cannot rely on photographic documents, although it is the photographs that primarily attract public attention. One can often hear people say, "If we had a clearer photograph, we would have made significant progress in the study of the UFO phenomenon." However, in reality, individual photographs are not irrefutable evidence. One of the experts in the field of photography, who received a grant to study photo tricks, notes that even then it was clear how inventive those who engage in photo falsifications can be. In the modern world, where computer technologies are accessible to everyone, the situation is only exacerbated. He claims that, just as 10 years ago, he can argue with anyone that no so-called photographic evidence will withstand special examination. There are two types of photographs related to UFOs. The first type consists of shots taken in a state of panic, when a witness observes some object. In such cases, the photographs contain minimal useful information. Most often, they capture only a tiny bright spot against a dark background. If the shooting took place during the day, the object becomes a barely noticeable dot in the sky. This is how all the photographs of the famous UFO observed in the French town of Vorep several years ago look. Even with the most sophisticated technologies, extracting any useful information from such photographs is practically impossible. The second type of photographs is more informative, but it is an extreme fake photographs. Although they do not become public knowledge as often as it seems, their authors manage to extract a considerable income. During his travels, especially in southern countries, the expert often saw books for sale containing photographs of forgeries. However, recognizing such photographs is quite simple for a professional. There is another category of photographs where the photographer is completely sincerely mistaken. A person sees something strange and tries to capture it, but it turns out to be just a natural phenomenon with which they have not encountered before. Sometimes unforeseen circumstances occur directly during shooting, which may be related to optical phenomena or defects in the film. One of the experts shares his experience. He could not decipher the secret of one photograph for a long time until he conducted an analysis of the film under a microscope. People also often make the common mistake of mistaking the reflection of real existing objects for a UFO. In our time, many people use portable video cameras, and the materials from such recordings can become wonderful material for analysis. An expert explains how to determine what has been captured in a photograph. He advises drawing intersecting lines across the entire photograph and drawing a thin line from one corner to another to find the center of the shot. If the brightest object in the photograph is a reflection, it should pass through the center and extend equal distances in opposite directions. The angle of reflection equals the angle of shooting. This is a well-known law of physics. People often shoot through a window or glass door. Many cameras are equipped with a protective coating on the lenses, which can create reflections at the moment of shooting, for example, from passing cars. The photographer may not notice this. If a car passes by at the moment of shooting, it can cast a glare on the lens, and a small mysterious spot appears in the shot. The photographer immediately decides that he has captured a real UFO. Such occurrences happen quite often. The expert emphasizes that he does not want to assert that all cases are related to random reflections. But before convincing the press that a flying saucer has been captured on film, one should ensure that there are no reflections in the photographs. Only then can it be considered that something truly unusual has been captured. In such a case, it is necessary to thoroughly analyze the photograph, pay attention to the color of the object, estimate the approximate distance to it, try to determine its size and possibly its weight. Sometimes unidentified optical objects become a reason for discussing the UFO phenomenon. In the early 1990s, photographs of unusual discs with jagged edges resembling symbols of the legendary comic book hero Batman appeared. According to eyewitnesses, these mysterious discs first appeared in the sky over Belgium, then in Spain, and finally in the United States. However, soon enthusiasts of the mysterious faced disappointment when it turned out that the images of bright objects were actually the result of shots taken out of focus. Portable video cameras had just begun to appear on the market, and many people still did not know how to use them correctly. Speaking of visual images, it is worth noting that our planet is constantly under the watchful eye of numerous satellites that take hundreds of photographs of Earth every day. But in these shots, there is nothing that could be identified as a UFO. There is a common misconception that if UFOs truly fly around the Earth, sooner or later we should see them in satellite photographs. However, proponents of this opinion forget that remote satellites orbit the Earth every 90 minutes at an altitude of 800 to 950 kilometers. All we see in satellite images are countless tiny dots on a vast surface. Even if 100 impressive UFOs were to land on Earth simultaneously, their flight would be impossible to capture with a satellite. We are dealing with an unknown phenomenon, and some cases are simply inexplicable. At least that seems to be the case at first glance. But the fact that we cannot immediately identify an object does not necessarily mean that extraterrestrial beings have come to visit us. The term UFO does not necessarily imply interplanetary spacecraft. Several years ago, Jean-Pierre Faribault, an engineer from the French Polytechnic Institute's physics laboratory, wrote a book titled Unidentified Flying Weapons. One possible explanation for the UFO phenomenon is the existence of secret military technologies. A CIA employee even prepared a report claiming that in most unexplained cases, UFOs are actually reconnaissance aircraft known as U-2. Indeed, some exercises involving U-2 aircraft coincided in time and place with UFO sightings, but experts believe this is only a small percentage of recorded cases. It is known that the first flight of the U-2 took place in 1955, while consistent reports of UFOs have been coming in since 1907. This explanation applies only to a few known facts, especially considering the enormous altitude that these planes can reach. At such heights, the so-called Rio effect comes into play. The aircraft has an elongated shape, but in sunlight, it can be mistaken for a round object. But how then can we explain the testimonies recorded before the appearance of U-2 aircraft? What did witnesses observe over all these years? There are also other types of aircraft that can be mistakenly identified as UFOs. They appeared later and are characterized by immense speed and altitude. These are the well-known blackbirds. There are two models that are similar in their main characteristics: the A-12, operated by the CIA, and the SR-71, which is under the jurisdiction of the Air Force. The A-12 first took to the skies in 1962, so its appearance cannot explain earlier sightings of unidentified flying objects, although it has certainly been mistaken for an extraterrestrial object many times. While engineers at the Lockheed Aircraft Corporation were developing the U-2 reconnaissance aircraft, the technical department of the United States Air Force was working on an even more ambitious project, dubbed the Silver Bug. The goal was to create a round-shaped flying object with vertical takeoff capability, able to ascend to an altitude of up to 24,000 kilometers and achieve speeds exceeding 3 times the speed of sound. The project was entrusted to engineers from the Canadian firm Avro, known for creating the supersonic, all-weather interceptor Aero SF-105. Avrocar became the new engineering project of this company, which had already established itself in the market. The project was funded by the Canadian government. However, it was never fully realized and ultimately was shut down. The main objective was to create a round-shaped vehicle capable of vertical takeoff and maneuvering in any direction in the air. But Avrocar was not the only project of its kind. Similar developments were underway in Germany after World War II. Unfortunately, funding from the Canadian government ceased halfway through, and Avrocar never managed to take flight. Its instability could have posed a danger during flight. In 1961, the Silver Bug project was suspended, and one of the two created models still stands as a monument near the United States Army Transportation School in Virginia. Some stories about unidentified flying objects may have been related to the test flights of Avrocar or other secret aircraft projects with unusual aerodynamic shapes, such as the YB-49 or V-173, which were nicknamed the Flying Pancake. In recent years, witnesses of unidentified flying objects may have observed flights of the strategic bombers B-2 or F-117, distinguished by their unusual shapes. Rumors about recent sightings of UAPs were also explained by tests of the latest top-secret weapon allegedly being developed in the legendary Area 51. This weapon is a triangular aircraft under the codename Aurora. Rumors about the existence of Aurora were actively spread in popular science publications such as Aviation and Space Technology. In 1990, one of the issues published an article in which more than 40 authoritative military sources confirmed the existence of Aurora, claiming that this aircraft is capable of achieving speeds 5 or even 8 times exceeding the speed of light at an incredible altitude, inaccessible to the Blackbird. In the early 1990s, a new phenomenon dubbed skyquake was actively discussed. This phenomenon, reminiscent of an earthquake, occurred in the air and began over the Pacific Ocean, heading towards Area 51. It happened every Thursday morning, always at the same time. Explaining this phenomenon was difficult, both from the perspective of natural phenomena and from the perspective of extraterrestrial intervention. It was unclear why it occurred specifically on Thursdays. In any case, skyquakes became an established fact, but soon information about them disappeared, and the United States Department of Defense officially denied all rumors related to this phenomenon. There was an impression that UFO sightings could be explained by observing devices created by humans. However, since these developments pertain to secret military projects, information about them is carefully concealed. Even this theory does not explain all reports of UFO sightings. There are other phenomena that may partially explain some UFO testimonies, but little is known about them. Many natural phenomena remain a mystery even for scientists. For example, the so-called earthquake lights, glows that occur during seismic activity, intrigued Franz Saint Laurent. He believed that this phenomenon could only explain a small percentage of UFO sightings. It is known that seismic lights can be observed during earthquakes or before and after them. They are directly related to tectonic activity. Earthquakes are preceded by months and even years of tense disturbances underground. In certain places, a surge of energy accumulates, and at the moment of eruption on the surface, seismic lights, known as earthquake lights, manifest. Interest in UFOs and seismic lights among researchers has a long history. Researchers have studied numerous unusual natural phenomena, including strange light orbs and unexplainable animal mutations, and found that all these phenomena are connected to such a common and explainable phenomenon as earthquakes. These events occurred in the same areas where strange natural phenomena were observed. As it turned out, earthquake lights have preceded seismic activity in various locations for centuries. Regarding the phenomenon of UFOs, many witnesses report seeing glowing objects of strange colors that move and behave unusually. Atmospheric temperature fluctuations create waves of varying lengths, which results in UFOs always appearing differently. All of this can be reasonably explained as a natural phenomenon. Pressure within the Earth's crust before an earthquake leads to the formation of glowing spheres. It has been established that seismic lights always appear on the eve of an earthquake. Most instances of their appearance are associated with the buildup of pressure within the Earth's crust. Researchers are confident in this. In areas with a significant amount of water, such as natural water reservoirs or artificial reservoirs created for waste disposal, tectonic activity is often observed. This leads to an increase in the occurrences of seismic lights. A very small percentage of reports about seismic lights are accompanied by accounts of contact with extraterrestrials. Researchers note, "We see what we see." The powerful electric field that arises produces a glow that is reflected in the sky. In the 1960s and 70s, scientists attempted to explain this natural phenomenon, which led to the emergence of several theories. Some of them studied seismic lights in laboratories, but all their hypotheses only partially explained this phenomenon. These theories are difficult to call perfect. Serious research on seismic lights is just beginning, but some things are known for certain. For example, the tectonic stress that occurs shortly before an earthquake spreads across the Earth's surface, just like the earthquake itself. This is accompanied by unusual phenomena, seismic lights or glowing spheres. An unusual noise can be heard underground, which can only be detected by rats and dogs. Sometimes the air at the earthquake site is filled with a strange smell. At times, there is a local drop in temperature, known as the palliation phenomenon, or conversely, an increase in temperature, which can lead to spontaneous combustion. If someone finds themselves on the eve of an earthquake, these mysterious forces may directly affect their brain, causing a state of shock. Studies have shown that the appearance of seismic lights is always accompanied by other paranormal phenomena. Poltergeists, the gathering of animals into flocks, unexpected household incidents, and peculiarities in human behavior, such as burnt-out light bulbs and generator malfunctions, may be connected to these phenomena. There may also be an increase in the number of suicides and the emergence of depressive moods. The study of the phenomenon of seismic lights is just beginning, but some scientists have already presented their possible explanations. One of them is a physics professor from San Jose State University in California, Friedman Front. The researchers met him by chance, and he proposed a theory and created a model to explain the phenomenon of seismic lights. His version seemed quite intriguing to many, and some have also tried to find an explanation for why the lights do not appear with every earthquake. In his theory, the scientist bases his claims on a discovery made several years ago. He asserts that beneath the surface of the Earth lie fiery rocks that form the foundation of the Earth's crust and act as carriers of energy charge. Without delving into complex scientific explanations, he simply states that he has discovered certain charge carriers, which he has named positive electron hole pairs. When tectonic activity is not manifested, these charge carriers remain in a dormant state. However, on the eve of an earthquake, they become quite active. In his laboratory, the scientist calculated that these charges can reach speeds of up to 300 meters per second, an incredible speed. Thus, by the time an earthquake begins, the rapidly moving charges can emerge to the surface of the Earth. In electronics, there is a concept of hole current, which leads to an increase in the maximum electric field. When these charges burst to the surface, they create electromagnetic waves of various lengths, which in turn form a strong electric field on the surface of the Earth. The scientists calculated that under ideal conditions, say on the surface of a mountain, the power of such a charge could reach 1 million volts per square centimeter. Impressive, isn't it? When an electromagnetic field of such power arises, the air becomes a conductor, and bright flashes of light can be seen in the sky. At a conference in Poughkeepsie in 1997, scientists came to one specific conclusion. There cannot be a single explanation for all the testimonies of Manello. Jersinger from Laurentian University in Sudbury emphasizes that when studying the phenomenon of UFOs, one should not adhere to a position of belief or disbelief in unexplainable phenomena. One of the main scientific principles is to avoid labeling, as any phenomenon is multifaceted. It provides a simple example. In the 19th century, doctors described several diseases using the same term, such as pneumonia, tuberculosis, the common cold, influenza, and lung cancer, grouping them together because they were all related to the respiratory organs. If penicillin had been invented back then and doctors had started treating everyone with it indiscriminately, only those suffering from pneumonia would have benefited. This highlights the danger of generalizing labels, which also applies to the phenomenon of UFOs. Today, there are numerous unexplained cases behind this phenomenon, most of which are linked to natural phenomena that have scientific explanations. However, there are also those that currently resist explanation, and this must be acknowledged. No one prevents the study of even these unexplained phenomena. One of the postulates of science states that we must consider all possible versions. UFOs have become a kind of label. The scientist asserts that in the case of seismic lights, one can be 80% sure that it is a natural phenomenon related to the seismic activity of the Earth's crust. The remaining 20% opens the door to various interpretations. In the future, we may encounter new phenomena and paranormal events, and it is not excluded that we may have encounters with extraterrestrial intelligence. As he has already said, we must consider all possible explanations. However, it is worth acknowledging that science does not give the UFO issue the attention it deserves. There are several reasons for this. First of all, there are the perennial problems of funding research. Commercial entities are reluctant to invest in the study of UFO phenomena. No money means no research. But a more serious issue is the biased attitude of scientists towards this matter. They hold the opinion that if UFOs are real, then interplanetary ships must exist. And since interstellar travel is impossible, all UFO sightings cannot be true. However, in any research, observation precedes the formation of a theory. As Robert Leighton, one of the pioneers of modern physics, said, "If something happens, then there are possibilities for it. The fact of the existence of UFOs cannot be denied, but not all testimonies can be explained. The question of whether unidentified flying objects are the result of testing secret weapons, yet to be studied natural phenomena, or perhaps encounters with aliens from space remains open." As of today, there is no confident answer to this question. The position of the police is that for a successful investigation, it is necessary to show interest in obtaining results. However, as noted by one of the participants of the conference, scientists did not take the results of the discussions held in Poughkeepsie seriously. This was not a surprise, as scientists have always approached the topic of UFOs with skepticism. Recently, one of the researchers conducted a check at the National Center for Space Studies, where he met with prominent scientists. He was struck by their position. For a true scientist, only what can be reproduced in laboratory conditions is real. If all great minds adhere to this point of view, science, in his opinion, is doomed. The problem of studying the UFO phenomenon lies in the fact that they can be observed infrequently, which also applies to scientific facts. If someone has truly observed a UFO, the researcher dreams of meeting them, as it seems unreal. Scientific facts are graphs, tables, and diagrams that are published in scientific journals, and they cannot be seen with one's own eyes. For example, a cloud is a scientifically justified phenomenon, but it only became so after study. Scientific facts do not arise from nowhere. Apples have been falling from trees for centuries, but no one paid attention to this until the law of universal gravitation was discovered. Newton was the first to notice this phenomenon, although the story with the apple was most likely fictional. Thus, an obvious problem arises. For something to become a scientific fact, scientists must consider it in a certain context. And until then, the question remains how to engage scientists with the UFO phenomenon. Perhaps it is worth rephrasing the problem, as the very term UFO repels those who consciously reject the possibility of its existence. This question remains open, and in the next program, the conversation about the mysterious UFO phenomenon will continue as we attempt to look into our future.